Hi guys.
Oliver Cornell, programmer.
Donna George, client user.
Where you guys from the construction engineer?
Jerome Gellin, architect.
Our meeting time, well, we have 3 meetings so far. And our first one was on 9/19. We talked about what the client's vision was in terms of the new school of architecture. Again, we met on the 24th. We just kind of discussed the roles of the consultants and began the preliminary investigation for program, equipment, stuff like that. And our last meeting was on 10/1, p.m. to 3:45 p.m. We took it a little further and talked about the future and discussing the highest square footage, stuff like spaces and so on.
Okay, the architect, we wanted to go out and incorporate other schools into the School of Architecture, so we're looking to landscape architecture, interior design, industrial design, urban planning, and construction engineering. What we're thinking about is having, not only do we feel that we can increase recruitment, but we're thinking also about, instead of having us act and play roles of being an architect, a contractor, an engineer, we could actually have a multidisciplinary class where we can have those students who are studying landscape architecture, interior design, and so forth, and we could have, we could go ahead and pursue a project, a real life project, where we could apply all our skills and abilities and use it. Here's an example of landscape architecture school, landscape architecture at Boston Architectural College. Okay. Here's an example of interior design. Here's an example of Georgia Tech School of Industrial Design, similar to what we do in design build and efficient housing. Here's an example of urban planning. Some of us have taken some urban planning courses. Again, what if we have these students working with architecture students together on a mutual project? And this is construction engineering, where we taught how to read blueprints.
So what I did, I kind of went to the different schools and looked what kind of programs they have in facilities. They incorporated the digital labs, the computer information, what kind of classrooms they have, digital labs, and different types of libraries, different disciplines that they had in. So this pretty much just I went to different schools, looked at what they had tried to incorporate data onto the program. And I looked into the different schools of landscapes, architecture, industrial, and interior design, looking at all their requirements and what they have and what we can include into our school, which will be a mixture of disciplines. So pretty much came up with a program. I had to come up with the square footage yet, just giving a kind of like a brief idea of what we were trying to incorporate in each part of our program and what we're looking into it. Still is a working process and it's going to keep evolving over the semester.
In terms of equipment requirements, we began to kind of explore like what we thought it would be like in the future, far from where we are now, and just extra amenities that we could use, such as construction studios. We have teleconferencing, holographic imaging, smart boards to aid teachers and instructors and students also, climate simulation labs, and wind tunnel testing. That's some of the examples.
Can I just ask you, that integrated projectors, is that also in the studios?
Yes, I did implement the studios also in the program.
Good.
Especially like graduate bars and like.
I've been lobbying for 2 years now for projectors in the studios. There are these pocket projectors. They cost about $200, $300, that you can plug your laptop into and project an image that's 6 feet by 6 feet onto a studio wall. So that during design studio, anytime you want to have a desk grid or a shared discussion, everybody doesn't have to try and scrunch down, look at your laptop screen. You can actually, anytime we want, look at stuff on the wall.
You wouldn't need a whole lot of them, just enough for
just
different years.
5 or 6 around the village.
These are some other examples of what the capabilities could produce in terms terms of the functionality, media rooms, again, places, more formal places, more creative places to showcase student work. And this is just some of the progressive modeling on the right side there.
Okay, as a construction engineer, after meeting with the architect and the owner, and for finding out what they want in the new building, I went out and researched companies that produce these different renewable and sustainable components that we could add to our building. One of them is solar roofing, and also finding out which companies have the best prices and components. Solar, this is also another component that actually moves, is a solar roof, which we're going to implement in the building. A new component which has been created by a German company. This is solar cladding, which we could use on the south side of the building, which will also produce electricity for the building and cut the cost. We also looked at green roofs, which we decided to put on the top floor of the terrace, which come in handy for the landscape students. And also looked at what material we could use to have this construction be done as quick as possible and as cheap as possible, which the material I decided I submitted to the group, which will be used will be steel, because steel is cheaper, it's quick to build, it's prefabricated, and we could bring it on site and put it up as quick as possible, so it reduces the length of time it will take to construct the building. It also, if we design it according to how we design it, could be a perfect example for the students in all these majors having the exposed steel and glass. We also, to have the building fit into the university, it's in the context it's in this university, to use bricks on the lower part and glass to make it modern. And this is an example of how it could look with the solar cladding, the glass, and the brick.
This was pretty much like our process for the research. So we start with research and we look into all the different disciplines, equipment stuff, and we decided we kind of create like a program. And now we're reviewing it, but we're still like in the working process. So it kind of shows you like the process we're doing. We'll do the review, we'll go to the space program, we review it again, see if it's all accurate to what we want. That's pretty much just the diagram showing our process and what we're doing to improve it and make it better.
So are you on schedule?
We're on schedule right now.
Do you have a schedule?
We have a schedule. It was in our previous slide. We should also incorporate it, put it in here to kind of show us where we are. We're going to review it again just to make sure everything's there so we can start moving into the space program, the square footage and all that stuff that we need to. We also talked about how high we want to go with the building, especially if we're incorporating all these different disciplines. Right now we're at 3 stories, 3 levels, so we're probably being like 4, 5, 6, something like that, just because we're incorporating different disciplines into the school.
You know, I support much of what you're doing, investigating different kinds of construction systems and green technologies and doing all these things kind of in parallel. But I think a decision like whether it's 3 floors or 4 floors, it's not the kind of decision you should be contemplating at this point in time, because that's going to come out of the mix of looking at how it's all beginning to come together, and it may suggest that you need to go with 4, but it's too early to make that kind of do that kind of research. And I really like the fact that you're looking at it from the point of view of not the past, but the present and the future, and technology and innovation and schools that seem to be trying to keep up with the times. Because I think that's the biggest challenge here in Tallahassee. Because Tallahassee's kind of isolated. We're not in Boston. We're not in New York. We're not in a place where people are sort of up to date. This place is like a little backwater that's behind the times. And so you need to do that. And also the idea of it being multidisciplinary fits in well with the integrated team concept of working, where all the different disciplines and all different expertise are at the table. But if we're here and all we deal with is architecture, we're only architects, and we don't have the other disciplines somehow involved in the program, then we're also not doing a good job in terms of simulating what actually would happen out in the world.
Right.
So that makes sense. That's a logic. There's a logic to that. It's kind of wishful thinking, but I support it. When I first looked at this, I thought, well, okay, that's good. You guys are now in the process of building your documentation, rather than talking about what you were planning to do and what you've done. You're actually showing what you've done, which I like. Anybody else have any questions about what they're doing and their approach? Yeah, you got a question back there?
It's not about the presentation.
All right. Well, let's go to group 7. And let's,
Oh boy. Please. Who took my tool? Take my tool.
I'm a new production on the programmer. Okay, we had 2 meetings so far, and what we discussed was basically our research process, which was information gathering. We started doing a questionnaire that we're distributing to students. We had the idea to just call people and ask them so it would be quicker instead of just giving them the paper and then waiting on them to give it back to us. We got a couple of responses. We were thinking of doing a building that was green, and some people think that the green program would be good. We also asked for solar panels and roofs. Some also asked for photovoltaic panels and stuff like that. Green walls in the atrium. Um, I also had a list of requirements as a user, what we want in the School of Architecture. And Adam is doing this data analysis, and after we gather all the data, Wayne is gonna do like a graph showing the statistics.
Okay, based on the work for programming, I went with some former students from the School of Architecture that used to attend Family School of Architecture, and as well as I speak to a few new students to see what their take is on the school itself, what issues and concerns they may have, things that I think that could improve the school, as well as right now I'm in the process of dealing with some professors as well, and hopefully maybe like a librarian or other workers within the building, so we could at least address all issues for each person user within the building. One of the things that I guess that we can discuss is that they're gravitating towards green and new innovative technology for the building, because as we all know, the school is a little behind in that area. As well as that too, there was also some concerns that we haven't updated us yet, is technology within the building, meaning that the computers, I think that's not too much on our end, but that's just something that we have an idea, okay, maybe we could implement some ways to kind of like address when there is newer technology coming that it could be used within the building as well. Yeah, and some tips that one of the former students gave was that, hopefully, with the information that he gave, that they can make a change within the next couple of years, because him being in a different school, which is CMU, they're really fast forward, and there's like a drastic difference. So I want to help improve that so that students like ourselves and upcoming would actually get that kind of experience as well.
On my part, I've been, even though I'm an architect, I've been doing a couple different roles, I guess. I've been running as kind of like a liaison, hey, where you at? We get, because everybody needs us, because right now, we're kind of, everybody's kind of works on their end and they come together. Well, I've been, trying to fast track that. Hey, Adam over here, he's got this great idea, man. He's such a cool guy. You did check this out. But also, I've been looking at precedents, and I'm really interested in not only programming, which they're doing, but also what fosters community. Because I believe that you could have a School of Architecture in a Walmart, and it doesn't have to be all fancy. And technology, the problem with technology is, look at this building, technology changes every day. I think Professor brought up the point where, will we be working on laptops in a couple of years? Maybe not. We might just have a cell phone, and they already have things that project out, keyboards, and he's talking about mini projectors. So do we need to be so much 100% on the technology? I believe the technology should be within the building itself, about how the building functions. As I said, fostering community, and also like on hard things like teaching. Kids will always, kids will always need to know, originally when they're growing up, hey, you start with A, B, C, shooting at one, they're not going to come in and go, okay, here's my first, second, and third skyscrapers. They have to sit there and they have to figure it all out. And so there's certain set things that people need, and that's what I was really interested in, a little bit more than, individual spaces. I'm trying to look at a whole and how the whole would function. Because even the programming we've done, they give you like the list requirements. They may even do a layout, but does it really? Unless they do a really good job at it, I think that well, it's also hard too, being an architect. Waiting on this, you kind of get your own ideas bubbling. I can see where in the real world there'd be a lot of headbutting, because they're sitting there going, oh man, need to do an SOA. I've been to one or two. I'm excited to get their own ideas in their head, and they start bubbling, and they're like, and then these other people come up, and they're hired in as professionals to come in and give you a plan, and you're supposed to do all this other stuff. I can see where there'd be a lot of, I guess,
mixed ideas going on there and a lot of head butting between them.
Do you think that means there needs to be a hierarchy, like a organization chart saying, architect's in charge, these people answer to the architect, these people answer to these
You
people?
know, it really depends on the people, the groups. Like, that's why I've been trying to run back and forth and trying to, you know, instead of being us, this is what I did, this is what I did, then come together and go, well, Shanique wants to do what she wants to do because she did it. And I'm trying to, you know, trying to soften the edge a little bit so it moves more like a group instead of like individuals that come together and do this meeting.
So more of a facilitator, less of a boss?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, I mean, it's about a community, and if there's long-term needs, not, oh, I did this one building right here because this is the way I felt. It's, you know, what this community that will constantly be developing will do. I think there's more to it than just one stroke.
Okay, Adam, the other part?
Yeah, but basically it was just made an outline of all the information that we would be gathering and going back over the process of collecting all that information and use that to help how we pick our materials and how it's gonna help with our design and how we go about our design. It's just we're gonna use that information.
You know, at some point, in a case like this, where you're working on different documents and different things, you probably need to start having something like a table of contents or a structure for how the pieces fit together. Even though it may, in the end, not be a book or a report in the normal sense, it might be an extended PowerPoint, it may be something else, but you need to figure out what is going to be the order of it, what's going to be the structure. Okay. Anybody have any comments? I have some general comments about this whole exercise of giving a status report. You probably noticed there's quite a range of ways of doing it, like particularly can you leave Blackboard up, because I'm gonna, like we saw today, there were two very different approaches. One was to show the product that is evolving, and in this case it was more about the discussions that have occurred and some product, like the site part. And I think in the next status report, we really need to see more product, so that it's sort of like presenting your preliminary, your whatever you're going to present in the end, presenting it in kind of an outline or preliminary form or some kind of product that is starting to evolve, so that it can grow over the rest of the semester. It's okay to say, okay, we met here and we met here and we met here and we did this and we talked about this. And you can still include that, but I do want to see, okay, so what? You did that, let's see it. And we'll go from there. Anybody have anything else? Okay. Thanks. a facility that is designed to foster creativity, designability, and innovation. And it should be up in there. What this was, in about 1996, I was hired by Motorola out of Chicago as a consultant. My architectural firm was hired to prepare a program for what they were calling Motorola University in Chicago. Motorola University was intended to be an executive training facility that would allow executives from all over the world, Motorola executives from Japan and wherever, to be brought up to speed on the latest technologies that Motorola was developing and their latest management techniques and their latest ways of operating, both in the field of sales and also in the field of manufacturing. As you probably don't know, in the 1990s, the first half of the 1990s, Motorola was the leader in producing cell phones and producing laptops and a lot of technology. The only other competitor was kind of Nokia. Apple wasn't involved, and so on in that area. So they were really going into gangbusters. They were opening up new offices all around the world, new manufacturing facilities, and so on. So the emphasis that they gave it when they gave me instructions on what they wanted me to do had a lot to do with innovation and forward thinking and technological forecasting and kind of looking at how programming can lead to creativity and reinventing the building type. So that was my challenge. And so let me go through the presentation. And I guess the point I want to make here is that as a programmer, you have a choice. You can be a stenographer. What you're doing is you're taking information people are giving you and you're processing it and you're putting it out there as the program. So you're really kind of providing a secretarial service. Or you can take the position that you're an expert, that you have something very significant to offer, and that you, in fact, are very much involved in shaping what comes out of that process. And that's the attitude that I took. So what I did was I assembled a team. I had one of the faculty from FSU who was internationally known for training programs and how they work. I got the help of Professor Torman, who used to teach research methods and how people learn with his area of PhD expertise and so on. So I had a team. It wasn't just me. I was there more as the, I guess, the catalyst and spark plug and organizer of the exercise. Although I found later on that I was very much involved in the content as well. So, it was Motorola out of Chicago that hired us. And what we came up with, my team came up with, was something called a seamless action learning environment. And this was something that Motorola didn't tell us. Through our research, we came up with this idea. And the basic idea of seamless action learning is that you learn by doing, and you learn by doing what you normally do, but you do it in an environment where you're getting lots of feedback and you're getting lots of feed forward and you're finding out how to do it better. So you're not being taken out of your normal context and put in a strange place and then being taught a number of new things. It's to extend what you're already doing. And so this is sort of a few pages out of the report. architectural concept, and that was coming out of the programming. Or an executive leadership innovation learning center at Motorola in Chicago. And this was meant to be duplicated in a number of cities around the world once this was set up as the prototype. And so to develop design guidelines for the center and to take the facility programming and do an implementation as a experimental setup to test the ideas, which we did. We went to Chicago, went to what was then Motorola University still, went to their facility, and we had them construct a mock-up eventually. And the idea was that Motorola was sort of like Apple and Google and all of these high-tech companies. They were very much interested in innovation, and they were very much interested in state-of-the-art technology. They were interested in learning from a number of different disciplines and so on. So a lot of it was team work, but the feeling was that they needed a special physical environment to support that kind of team interactive, creative learning process. And that was our challenge. What would that look like? What would that environment be? And so we came up with some ideas for that physical facility. And they wanted Motorola to stay ahead of the curve, to continue to be a leader in this field, which of course they didn't do, and a few years later they kind of bombed out, and you no longer think of Motorola when you think of the cell phones. They had those flip phones, and anybody here ever have a Motorola? So this was the main idea. The idea was that we were going to create a place that was unlike your normal classroom building, unlike your normal university space. It was more like a garden in a way, where we had this large group area, and that large group area had a series of support spaces, which we called the arcade. And these arcades had individual pods where individuals or very small groups could be concentrating. And then those were supported by another outer circle of other kinds of things. Like, for example, this was our serendipity garden. This was a place you could go to be kind of within yourself and contemplate. And then, of course, there were informal refreshment areas and places where people could just accidentally meet, and large technical support, and so on. And I'll get into some of those a little bit. This was the program. We described verbally the nature of the place. It wasn't really that much about how many square feet it had, but what does it feel like? What's it going to be like to be there and try and do things? And so we tried, in a sense, to manipulate behavior. For example, the entry space was meant to be very narrow. So you come out of your car, you walk across the parking lot, you go through the entry, and you go through what is almost like a tunnel. And that is meant to be a transitional experience so that your mind kind of refocuses itself, and you realize you're now entering someplace different. It isn't just a door and bang, you're in there. You go through this process. And then you go into a place that is the beginning of the arcade, and you begin to see things revealed to you. So again, I'm describing the experience rather than the place. The main workspace was meant to be something where people could at any time come together as a group and have group discussions and group work and so on. And very flexible, so the seating can be rearranged at any time very easily, the tables can be rearranged, and it's not fixed. And there isn't always an instructor at the front of the class. Sometimes it's a whole different kind of operation. One of the things that's very important in that large shared common space was a lot of display. And in this case, we were imagining that these would be digital display walls combined with other kinds of display that you could put up on the wall and so on, so that it was very easy to have that kind of information. And so we even thought that there could be large screens, and if there is an executive in, say, Tokyo that's participating in the university, they would be doing it virtually. They would be, you know, Skyping and be, you know, participating in the process. Do you have a question here? No. Now you got to remember, this is 1996, and we didn't have the technology we have today. We were imagining what the technology is going. So some of the things we were proposing didn't exist yet, and now they do. So you guys could do the same thing. You could think about, well, what's the logical extension of this technology into the near future and into the future, and how might that have an impact on architectural education? So this was sort of this world that we were creating, the world within worlds, very much supported by technical support people. There were people behind the scenes that were running the projectors, running the computers, running the supporting the different information needs that were required. So there might even be someone behind the screen who is told, pull up such and such information from such and such country. And that would be pulled up on the screen, and that would help with whatever training or whatever learning was going on at the time. The individual work areas were meant to be a replica of what they had back at their office. So what we're really doing is taking their desk and their office space and transporting it to this place. So they're in their comfortable environment that they're familiar with. The stuff's where they usually keep it. They don't literally have their same desk, but we have the same setup. So one of the things, if you're going to this training center, you send them a picture of your desk and your office, and we try to replicate it. So you come there, and you're at home, and you do your normal work. The difference is you're not physically where you normally are, but you're there digitally, electronically. You know, you can have your normal staff meeting that you would have back at your office, but you're there through Skype and everybody else is sitting around the table. So we didn't want to take people out of their job and make them unproductive for a couple of weeks while they're in this training center, learning center. We wanted them to continue to function, and what would happen was the people who are the instructors and the experts would be observing what they're doing, and then they would give them counsel. Say, okay, you ran a great meeting back there, but you know, you missed something. That guy down at the end was asleep, and you should have bonked him on the head. So the displays, very important. The arcade was kind of this interesting idea of stimulating creativity, where people could go from right brain to left brain to back and forth, and through multisensory, they had a choice. They could go to a very quiet place, they could go to a very stimulating place, and they all had different things that it provides. And a lot of it had to do with, you know, artwork and plants and things like that. So these were the actual physical descriptions of those areas. This is a sketch I did of that main workspace, and you can see these are all kind of display things, and these are pin-up areas, and I deliberately kept the sketches very, very vague and kind of very sketchy so that people didn't get too hung up about what kind of chair they're getting. And this is a further description of those individual spaces. There were small group areas, there were small group breakout areas, as well as the large main space, as well as the individual pods and the individual work areas. And even the circulation areas are carefully programmed to take advantage of those spaces. They're not just throwaway spaces. And these are further descriptions of the various spaces that we were proposing. So, again, here's the general relationship. All the different kinds of things that we're proposing in this learning environment. Now, this might apply to a school of architecture. I mean, you can imagine where if architecture becomes more interdisciplinary, if architecture becomes more a team effort, more based upon shared modeling and shared prototyping and all kinds of different things, then these might even be something resembling the individual design studios, and then there's all the kind of support things and different opportunities to do different things. So these were some of the design principles that we built into it. We realized it couldn't be conventional. It couldn't be ordinary space. It couldn't be just your normal office building or your normal classroom building. We based it on something called occasions. Occasions had to do with what is the event? What's going on? How does it feel? What are they trying to do? So it's all dynamic and it's based on time. And we also thought that it was very important to deliberately program the in-between space, the in-between time, in addition to the actual program time. And so image was very important in our thinking. The opportunities that the place provided, the behaviors that he engendered, and so on. Some of the principles, flexibility of interpretation. By that I meant that someone can go there and they read something personally from it that might be different than the next person. There's always a preparation sequence before you arrive at the thing itself. So there's kind of this journey destination. Multiple sensory channels where you could choose. You could choose to be very, sound oriented, very color oriented, very visual. Imagination triggers. The building we're in right now does not trigger for me any very much imagination. It's kind of bland. It's very void of sensory stimulation. I don't know if you all agree with me, but that's what I'm feeling about it. And this was an attempt to build into the facility triggers, imagination triggers, creativity triggers. Lighting was really important, task lighting and how you distribute the lighting. Have variation in dark and light. The Eastern philosophy values the shadow. We value the light. There's really strong arguments that can be made for valuing the shadow. So this is another sketch I did which kind of showed the idea of pools of light, pools of darker. Yeah, you got a question? What's that? Total cost? I can get to that end. Although I'm going to run out of time. We also like the idea of thick walls of substance to the building, of places where you could just sit down if you felt like it, and it wasn't, automatic, wasn't something that was pretty obvious. Some of the other, and this is more like Chris Alexander's pattern language of painting, have small windows. We didn't want distractions. We wanted each space to have different furniture. We didn't want uniformity throughout. We wanted to have variety. We wanted some things to be concealed and then discovered. We wanted certain things to be sort of accidental and not overly contrived or overly planned. We wanted things to be interlocked in terms of spatial patterns so that it's sequences rather than individual, you go through a door, another individual thing. There's some deliberate sequential thing. again, multiple channels of information so you can make some choices about your individual preferences, about how you receive information in the whole thing. And the relationship between the past, present, and the future was really important, and we wanted not to dismiss the past, but we wanted to be in the present and engaged in the future. So that was sort of some of the principles that drove the way we structured this. So that was one of the consulting projects I did in the mid-90s. And I wanted to present it because I saw a lot of the things you guys were doing, I would consider as kind of conventional thinking about a school of architecture. You were looking at this building to say, well, what else do we need? Or are the studios too big or too open? You didn't even question whether we should have studios. Or you didn't question the whole kind of premise of the building, a building, you know. So as a programmer, I would really prefer that you not be a stenographer. You not be somebody who simply is taking notes and transcribing them and then putting them out there and saying, this is the building that has to be designed. But that you, in fact, and you guys are all experts because you've all been students here. You're all been in the architecture building, at least some of you for a long time. And so you should feel like the programming, the pre-design activity should be very much influenced by you, by your individual experience, your individual ideas, your imagination, your creativity. That's okay. In most cases, if you have a commercial client who's interested in making money, they won't tolerate too much of that. But in this case, I had a really good client. A client that was, it's sort of like being hired by Google or being hired by, you know, one of the Silicon Valley startups saying, okay, we just want you to create a place where all this great stuff can happen. Well, architecture school should be like that, I think. I mean, you guys are supposed to be learning how to be problem-solving, creative problem-solving people with the ability to envision things that don't exist yet. So that's what I wanted to get across today. Anybody have any other questions other than cost? We did, by the way, and I should have had pictures of it. We did go to Chicago, and we set up. They had a big space, and we set it up as a mock-up. And we, in fact, were then pushing for them to give a large grant to the School of Architecture so that we would create that environment here in the building with the argument that architecture is very similar to the way Motorola was functioning and trying to develop new technology, innovative technology. And we would be quite happy if they would pay for us to have a facility like this here in the school, and we would monitor its success and give them feedback, and we would run this as a project for several years. Just about that time, Motorola stopped tanking. And there was a kind of a mini recession that went on, and they ended up pulling back, and they closed a lot of their facilities, and this was just bad timing. But we came very close to having a long-term research project here at the school, which had to do with designing spaces for innovation and creativity and advancing the state of the art. So, that's it. Nobody has any comments or feedback? Somebody got I'm sorry, we gotta go. You gotta go to 121 after that. Only a minute. 3 minutes late.